Well, I dropped the hint yesterday, fairly subtle, about what was happening today. He's here. He's back. We're now even. He's been on my show twice. I've been on his show twice. The great, the unparalleled, the Peabody Award nominated and eventual Peabody Pulitzer, give him all the awards. He's Pablo Torre, wearing headphones to cover up his newly sprouted dog ears.
I don't know how to explain to my family what the photo you're referring to is. I don't know how to explain it to your audience. Just know that involves, I guess, one of PFT commenter. And again, I just can't get over the fact that you are responsible for him, for Eric. Spoiler alert. And Big Cat's fans, AI generating a photo of the two of us being truffle sniffing hounds. There it is.
There it is.
It's as I say, an incredible haircut I have that is only I believe framed even more helpfully by the ears. By the ears that you don't have. You don't have the ears. I have the ears.
Yeah, I'd love to see what the specific term was that generated that, because I didn't get the dog ears. You did. And also the documents, as I did not notice until this morning, the documents are strictly confidential. Not confidential. Confidential. We have discovered, which is kind of like how dogs would read if they could. Like they'd get it wrong. Like they'd kind of be in the vicinity and they'd think it says confidential. I don't know, but that was something.
But they are buried and being dug up, which I think is absolutely accurate, despite the confidentiality being alleged. It's quite accurate about how our relationship works. We tend to sniff around looking for documents, occasionally sniff each other's butts. I suppose that's part of the parallel too. We talk a lot on the phone about all of this. And so we are here, I guess, doing it in public, which is jarring for maybe everyone else, even more than us.
And look, in contrast to your podcast, which is extremely well structured, even though it doesn't feel that way, I know it is. This is just you and me talking as if we're talking on the phone, which we have done far more in recent days. I am confident that you and I have spoken more than I have spoken with anyone on the phone in recent weeks. So this is just another one of those conversations, where we are, where we may be going, where this thing is heading, because I feel like there are more twists and turns and ups and downs before the roller coaster heads into the station.
Yeah. I have no idea where this conversation or this story is going to go next. I have some theories, but man, like every day, it's remarkable. Every day there are not a couple of things. There are many new developments, I would say. Yesterday being the latest example, minutes before we jumped on here, we were just listening together to Dan Patrick interview JC Tretter. And I don't necessarily want to start there, but start wherever you'd like. It's just, yeah, people are now in the business, Mike, of talking after deliberately not doing so for the duration of our reporting, and their incentive to talk, their comments, what they're saying, all of it feels like a useful thing to evaluate through the lens of, two guys who've been on this more obsessively than anyone else.
And before we get to that, and I don't want to take up too much time on this, but every good superhero tandem has an origin story. And the public needs to know how this all happened. And at the end of the day, there is a trail of breadcrumbs connecting the turmoil at the NFL Players Association to Jordon Hudson.
It's the craziest twist in this whole thing, you might argue. That because you're right. You line up the dominoes in meme fashion, right? You turn over one small thing and then the big one happens. We haven't gotten to the final big domino yet, but currently you can say accurately that Jordon Hudson is responsible for the regime change at the NFL Players Association.
That's crazy, but it's true.
It's actually true.
Because you reported, it was a Friday morning in May, you reported that Jordon Hudson had been banned from the North Carolina facility. I don't know that the report was on a Friday morning, but the response was on the Friday morning from North Carolina. And their statement was loaded, even though it tried to seem innocuous. And no, she hasn't been banned. And I was one of the few in the media who understood that you weren't reporting that Jordon Hudson has been told, if you walk through the door, we're calling the SWAT team. Like you are physically prevented from ever coming into the facility. The point is you are no longer working for, and you never did, North Carolina, even though you de facto were. And you reached out to me because I was one of the only ones that understood the nuance in your reporting.
Yes.
And that's where our relationship, friendship began. We didn't know each other at all before then, and we got to talking. And then it was just a couple of weeks later that I was doing PFT Live with Michael Hawley, and he said something that made me remember the collusion ruling that had been hidden by everyone. And I said then and there, during the slow time, my number one mission is to get that thing revealed. And you saw my call to the world. We kind of joined forces that way. Let's see what we can do. And the next thing you know, Lloyd Howell's out and JC Tretter's out. And my wife said to me last night, are you proud of that? It's like, I'm not proud of anything but the fact that we knew something was happening that shouldn't have been happening, and we pursued it in an effort to get to the truth. I'm proud of that.
Oh,
and whatever happens once the truth comes out, that's not our thing.
Oh, we should be clear. Like in that series of dominoes, of course, like Don Van Natten and Kalen Kaler are in there. Right. Like,
yes.
And this is, by the way, what I love about what we've been doing here, beyond the fact that it started with Jordon Hudson, which is God. It's the fact that at every turn we've been calling for more journalism, more sunlight. Other people, here's the roadmap of what we found out. Please follow this, look into it. And thankfully, a couple of people aforementioned have joined the party. The water was always warm. And so we are frankly, speaking, God, I speak as if we're the royal we now for both of our parts. I will say I'm appreciative of the journalism that has been at the root of the regime change. That is what I am proud of, is that, oh, this stuff actually matters. And by the way, when it comes to just the Jordon Hudson thing, our origin story here is that you saw through the PR spin of that comment, right? Of what UNC said, which is, she was never employed here. She is not employed here. But in a personal capacity, she is welcome to work for Bill Belichick, right? Which is effectively, as a through line in the story will suggest, it's effectively a non-denial about the fact that she's not welcome in the building for football purposes. And through this whole thing, it's always about, can you parse the spin? Can you be casual in your description while also being legal in your meticulous thinking? And that's where I think both of us have gotten along famously, beyond the fact that you hired me like, they hired Boba Fett in Star Wars. Just like, we have a bounty hunter. Can anyone find this document? And I'm like, I think I got a spacecraft. Yeah, let's get at it.
And we've been more than happy to credit, embrace, and champion anyone else in the space that is willing to practice true journalism. And I don't know what journalism really is, because I've got no journalistic training. But the one point that Jay Glazer made to me years ago, and I mention it all the time, 95% of the stuff that happens in the sports media space is not journalism. The only real journalism that happens is finding out the stuff they don't want us to know.
Bingo.
And we needed people, and initially I thought we needed people who don't rely on access, because when you rely on access, you can't go into this minefield of things that may piss off those to whom you require access. But I think there's a greater degree of courage than that. It's not that there are people who don't require access. It's people who aren't afraid about jeopardizing their access, because we all need a certain degree of access. You do, I do, Don does, Kalen does, but you have to not care about it. And there's too many people in our business who are so concerned about jeopardizing any amount of their access that they've made that bargain and they're not going there. We're just not doing it, because we're not even going to have that conversation about what it may do. We don't want to impair our access. We don't want to have to put elbow grease on anything to get our access back. We're just not going to jeopardize it. The car is bright and shiny, and we are not going to put a scratch on it anywhere.
Yeah. Look, all of us, and I fully disclose this whenever possible, all of us have relationships. This is not the story of two monks who only worship at the altar of pure objectivity to the exclusion of getting to know people in the course of the decades we've spent in and around our respective fields. What it is the story of, though, and I want people to realize this because this whole thing has echoes, Mike. I can't stop thinking about how this all feels like politics, both because it's literally talking about an elected position in the role of executive director and how one shapes, forms, educates, or blinkers the electorate, right? It's also politics in the sense of we have been, meaning the media has been turned into the convenient villain by JC Tretter from the start, frankly, of this story, back when he was running the search the first time and changing the Constitution and amending it to prevent even those voters, the Board of Player Reps, from knowing who the candidates were until, again, they show up, which is, again, this thing I just can't get over how crazy that is. Amending the Constitution, 30 days to you'll find out when you get here, right? Eliminating prior vetting, let alone public sunlight and vetting. It also is politics in the sense of I just want people to realize, frankly, that the people who share an incentive to tell you the most truthful story at the cost of various other professional interests and financial inducements might be the media people whose business is telling you truthful stories. And so find those people, evaluate them, vet them yourself, by the way, but know that when we report something and it results down the domino line in 2 resignations, feels like that's a useful data point.
And as I say all the time, primary duty is to the audience and to the truth and to telling the audience the truth. And when you mention that it is political, you're right. It is political. It's a very political job. And the difference between the electorate for the president, for example, or senators or governors, the duty to the electorate, if you are the NFLPA executive director or president or member of the executive committee, there's a fiduciary duty to your constituents that doesn't exist in normal politics. So if anything, the stakes are higher in the world that you and I have been investigating and trying to shine a light on, because there are certain false moves that you can make that can get you in serious legal trouble, as we are learning. And, as we try to figure out where this is going to go, the FBI is already investigating activities related to the NFLPA and Lloyd Howell, and now the strip club expense report misadventures. That, I believe, will get the attention. It should get the attention of the regulatory agencies and federal prosecutors, because it's dues paid by the players that are being used for purposes completely unrelated to the mission of representing the players collectively. And it just feels like, that was the moment this all kind of changed, where it's like, boy, it feels like somebody may have to go hire a lawyer at some point to handle a white collar criminal defense.
You know what? I want to talk about the strip clubs as well, not just because it's hilarious, just that it's all, by the way, the other theory of politics that I share is that all of this is also Veep, that show where like it's just rank tragicomic incompetence as much as there is strategic chess master malice, right? All of these things can coexist. The whole thing about the strip club stuff, my regret is that, and I fully credit Don Van Natta on nailing it down. I had heard this. I didn't, in fact, I can say for now that I had heard it to be more expansive than this, but never was able to nail it down in terms of like how many cities did this happen in, right? I underestimated, and what a naivete, right? I underestimated the public power of a strip club expense report. I wish I had spent more time investigating and nailing that down. Whether or not I would have done it is a separate question. But when you talk about the unlocking of the door to public conversation, I just noticed, for instance, Pat McAfee finally weighs in on this subject in public.
Didn't address it at all until the strip club expense reports came out.
And it became this thing that everybody could wrap their mind around. And it's, a clinic in not just American democracy, but in American media literacy. It's like, oh, I don't need to know anything about the law. I don't need to know anything about constitutional amendments. I don't need to know anything about conflicts of interest and private equity. I just know that sounds like a thing a dirtbag would do. And so it became this skeleton key into the minds of people who just had disinterest in labor relations. Of course, the story, I would argue, has been this entire time as confetti on Zoom falls upon me.
Something about this
Yeah.
triggers confetti. It happened to me earlier today on the score in Chicago. I can't do it now, which means there it goes. I was lying, but no, there's something about the air quotes that makes confetti fall. Go ahead.
Yeah.
And it won't happen again now that you're trying.
I think I blew our confetti load, Mike. I'm sorry. The refractory period for confetti has now set in.
Okay.
The thing I'm trying to say, by the way, on topic for what we're talking about, vis-a-vis Tootsies, right? Like what I'm saying here is that that's the kind of thing that draws the attention of people who are just like, I've been unsure of how to get into this, and now it feels like it's fully okay because of the strip club thing. And it's just funny. It's funny how stories like this, you can have smoking guns, and the thing that actually you need is a strip club expense report. And I fully credit the reporting on that.
And it makes sense because at the end of the day, we're storytellers. Anyone in the media, you got to be telling a story. And one of the confusing things about this story, if you don't understand the nuances, is who's the villain.
Mm-hmm.
And are we sure that Lloyd Howell's the villain, or is somebody out to get him? Is he really the secret protagonist who is aligned against forces that are trying to bring him down unfairly? You throw in the strip club expense report, and we know who the villain is. And then it's a hell of a lot easier to frame this story.
Yeah, you don't have to go through the whole. And by the way, what I love about the episodes we've done together over on my show is that I swear to you, it'll if you haven't listened to it, which is insane to contemplate if you're listening to this, but it's basically a true crime style unfolding, right? It is actually meant to be mainstreamed in all those ways. But my God, like when it comes to the list of things, Mike, my other difficulty here has always been, and I've been talking about this, thankfully, on PTI. I've been filling in for Wilbon, and I've been asked to explain the story to America in this way. And I do it the best I can. But if you're to do the comprehensive accounting of what's in this thing, it's just very funny to me that the FBI investigation is invariably like, it's Lindsey Buckingham. It's like we ran out of time before he got to show up on set.
Yes.
I'm like,
what up with that?
Yes, it's what up with that? Well, I'm sorry. Next time we'll get to you, Lindsey. Literally the FBI. Like, that's how crazy this is. And I think that's the right call, by the way, as I've always said. Like, I think the FBI one-team investigation, which we will and should get to, by the way, spoiler alert at some point, that is still, that's a later course in this meal that continues to unfurl.
And if anyone hasn't seen either of the two episodes that Pablo and I did together of Pablo Torre Finds Out, or other episodes of it, it really is fascinating for me because when I watch it, it's such a different experience because when we do it, it's just like this.
Yes.
But I know that as you lead me through the topics, that there's a structure to it. There's a design in mind. And then your team does such a great job of editing everything together and making it all come to life. And look, what do we do? An hour and a half, 2 hours each time. It's boiled down to about an hour. There's some interesting stuff on the cutting room floor.
Always.
But to watch the whole thing and the final product, it really is amazing. And your crew works hard. They put a lot of work into it, and it comes through. Obviously, it's someone like me who's been part of the raw recording to see how it ends up. It really is impressive.
Well, look, the sausage getting made is another through line in all of this, right? Like, how does this stuff happen? What do you see once it gets to a, let's just call it a public ready form? Like, okay, what do they want us to know? For us, by the way, and this is where it's interesting to talk about this stuff in a meta way, which I wouldn't do over on my show, so I appreciate it here, is, yeah, we are trying to replicate for the audience the experience we've had in our personal gradual revelation around why these things connect. And you got to withhold some details for them to pay off later. That's storytelling, right? That's different from certainly it's different from an arbitrator's summary of findings, right? You get the summary at the top. And by the way, different from news, different from what you do at PFT. Like, of course it is, right? In the news business, it's different from here is the ride we're going to take you on, in which you're going to basically get to feel what it's like to be us, being surprised and learning. And the sausage making of what's been going on at the union, man. I think it's worth pointing out that if you don't see this through that legal lens, right, of two resignations now happening amid some balloons popping.
Here we go. Now we got balloons.
Man,
They're still working on the confetti, but the balloons were locked and loaded.
The balloons field. That's just passive aggressive from Zoom against me at this point. Yes, we're spiking the football. We get it. Algorithm AI telling us that we're smelling our own farts too much. But the lens to view it through really is legality, because at this point, as you know, as a lawyer yourself, people are concerned about the next steps. And if you think that the next steps don't involve litigation, I got news for you, buddy. Like, that's part of what's happening here. And everybody's saying, whoa, 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 it was never me. Never me. I had nothing to do with this. I'm out of here. This is nope, not my horse, not my problem.
Well, you're right. And look, there was a document making the rounds over the weekend. I never posted it because we couldn't figure out who wrote it, but it laid out the legal risks that the NFLPA was taking as it embarked on the election of a new interim executive director, or any interim executive director at this point.
Yep.
And who knows whether or not that contributed to JC Tretter walking away, but it was clearly targeted at him. And I've tried, and this is what has been one of the big challenges here, because I want to keep my radar screen as broad as I can and gather any information that may be relevant, that may be trustworthy, that may represent a lead that we can then discuss and pursue. But you got a lot of people with motivations who then try to crowd into the space because they have a friend that they would like to suggest for interim executive director, or they'd like to be interim executive director. So they're cozying up to us because, hey, if you guys can knock Humpty Dumpty off the wall, maybe you can make me the next Humpty Dumpty. I mean, we get in position for all of this now. So I've been very, very careful and very, very skeptical of everyone's motivations, because this is where we are now. There's a power vacuum that people are trying to fill. And I still don't know how it's going to be filled, and they don't know how it's going to be filled.
But I just want people to understand the authenticity of what you're saying, because in our phone calls, I hear the more uncensored version of people trying to worm their way in. Because look, as you know, I'll be the second person in this story on the record to quote Game of Thrones. Chaos is a ladder, right? Like, you figure out, oh, there's an opportunity for me now, right? And so all of this, of course, is the subtext. If you're truly fluent in the characters here, right? That's certainly the subtext, and that's politics too. And so for me, I've admired your stance in that. And secondly, it's why, for me, the entire thing has always been, can you get the documents? Can you get evidence? Because you're right. If this is all he said, she said, I don't think the domino tips over, frankly. I think it needs to be, here is the source material. Read it, evaluate it. It's why I publish it on my Substack, www.pablo.show. It's why we have really called for sunlight and lived up to it. Like, if you don't trust me or Mike Florio, just go look at the stuff. We're publishing the source material here. You tell me what you think after processing all of the surrounding information.
And keeping with my plan to have no plan for this, you mentioned the source material. The document that got all this started, the 61-page collusion grievance ruling. And I still have memories of people suggesting it might not be authentic, it might not be complete, and somebody might be reporting on that. And that never happened. But that was
I'm
just
waiting.
part of
I'm waiting for it. Yeah,
that was part of the shit reaction by people who had their interests undermined by the fact that you were able to get that document and put it out there. But I mentioned this at PFT. I think I mentioned it yesterday here at PFT PM. JC Tretter talked about it today on Dan Patrick's show. He mentioned it in his interview with Jonathan Jones of CBS. And I'm astounded by this claim that as the chief strategy officer of the NFL Players Association, who was one of the key witnesses in the collusion grievance hearing, for him to not know anything other than we lost until you unearthed the ruling. First of all, I don't believe him. But second of all, if you do believe him, and he's the chief strategy officer, and if you listen to him on Dan Patrick Day, and anybody that hasn't seen it, go check it out. I didn't have anything to do with that. Dude, you're the chief strategy officer. Like, this is the most important strategy beyond CBA negotiations that the union is ever going to have on its plate. What do we do with this thing? We kind of have the tiger by the tail here. We got one arm on the tail, and yeah, we lost the grievance, and JC Tretter pointed that out. Well, we did lose the grievance. Yeah, but you secured a partial win, and you harvested evidence that Dan talked about, the Dino text messages. Like, there's evidence there of actual collusion, even if the arbitrator got that part wrong. But the arbitrator didn't get the part wrong about the league urging the teams to collude. How does the chief strategy officer not know about that? And Pablo, this is my point. If he's telling the truth, how did he not pack up and walk out the door when he found out that they had not involved him in the most important strategy that the NFLPA would be doing until the next CBA is up?
Yeah, needless to say, both of us, let this be an invitation to JC Tretter if he so desires, right? To respond to our messages. Please sit for an interview with both of us because we got questions, and we'll even preview the questions in this conversation. Because one of the questions I have, I mean, look, Mike, when you are, let's say, an executive who has more experience with the union than the guy who had been installed as the executive director of the union under your supervision of the process, which was deliberately engineered to be secretive and involving, again, yes, confidentiality agreements, actual signed documents, in the way that the actual collusion ruling, the 61-pager, was also sealed ex post facto by confidentiality agreement. One must wonder whether you had curiosity about what was in that, given that you yourself, and we only know this because we released the document, were a character who actually did get his cell phone searched, did in fact have to testify, was in fact a key player, pun only semi-intended, in the proceedings. And you're telling me that given all of that, you didn't know anything, by the way, about this decision that subsequently, and this is just so much is happening, so forgive me as I try to diagram these sentences I'm saying out loud in my head as I say them, especially given that the decision to seal it by NDA was then recently, last week, said to be, oh, wait a minute, hold on, we're going to appeal this thing actually. Like, yeah. What are we doing? What are we even doing?
It really is amazing. And you make a great point. JC Tretter was much more invested in this collusion grievance than Lloyd Howell was. And one of the theories for keeping it quiet is it makes D. Smith look good, and it undermines Lloyd Howell's position that we have strength through peace, and let's get along, and let's be friends, and let's work with these folks. Let's not litigate all the time. All D wanted to do was sue, sue, sue. Oh, he kind of won that one. Well, let's just bury that one and label it confidential. So yeah, if I'm JC and I'm telling the truth, and it's my opinion that he's not.
Oh, and yes, by the way, obviously we are presenting facts and now drawing interpretations, but let's take him at his word, as you're saying, please.
He should have stormed out when he found out that Lloyd Howell hid from him this ruling, that Lloyd Howell stuck it in a drawer and didn't even tell JC Tretter about it. But that's what happened if JC Tretter's telling the truth.
I found it so fascinating on the Dan Patrick show today when he then is asked by Dan about, like, you know, why didn't no one do anything with this, basically. And he then sort of launches into this whole thing of like, well, that was just a temporary hold, basically. It's now being appealed, all that stuff. And I'm like, can we please talk about whether the decision to suppress this via NDA was a good idea or not? Do you, JC Tretter, think that was a good idea? It seems like ex post facto, again, in this interview, you're saying, well, actually, that wasn't a big deal. And I can only imagine, Mike, given your logical sort of analysis here, which I agree with, that if he said nothing, he agreed with the move, right? Both at the time, but we didn't have to grant that. After we published it, he stayed and supported and said nothing, right? As this insane plan the second phase of the insane plan began to reveal itself. We're going to appeal it now, by the way. We're going to actually fight for the players because there's some bad stuff in here. Like, okay, so you were, if not aware of it at its origin, you were co-signing as chief strategy officer the very strategy that to me is disqualifying given the contents of the report of the ruling, which I cannot stress this enough. Nobody would know if we didn't publish it. So if not for us, literally nothing with this appeal would have happened. And so how can you be all of these things at once is my fundamental question, I guess.
One of the things that fascinated me is he was reciting the talking points today. Well, we did lose. We did lose the grievance. But then when he started to talk about where it stands, he slipped into true believer mode, which I appreciate. He believes that they colluded. He believes that the appeal could be successful. He understands that the three-party panel that will hear the appeal could disagree with the arbitrator. And if two of the three do, this thing gets very interesting. Maybe gets set back for a hearing on damages. And there are many dollars at stake if that happens. But there's never been a clear articulation offered by anyone as to what the strategic purpose of hiding this was. And this gets back to his title, Chief Strategy Officer. If we're going to hide this, what's our strategy for hiding it? Because when we hide it, one thing we do is we prevent the upcoming class of free agents that might be trying to get fully guaranteed contracts from having this at their disposal to just say, hey, we're watching you, Dino. Don't give me that crap about you can't guarantee 3 years. Is this more of that collusion? Do we have to search your phone again, Dino? I mean, it can't hurt your effort to get your best possible deal for your clients and to get fully guaranteed contracts. And this is where it comes back to the potential for litigation.
Yes.
Because there's a duty of fair representation lawsuit lurking out there on behalf of players for different reasons. And one very rich plot of land would be this idea that the guys who signed contracts after that decision was made and who were prevented from knowing about it had their leverage and their negotiating power diminished by the union inexplicably hiding it.
Bingo. Like, to me, right? And let's take it out of turn the camera away from us, if you will, and think about it. If you're a player who was in fact up for negotiation in that summer, 2021, and they were not told, or I mean, frankly, any of the previous summers in between this and the release of the ruling, they were not told what was in it. And so a question for JC Tretter might be, do you feel like you fulfilled your fiduciary duty as an executive at the union, as one of the, by the way, highest paid executives at the union, hired by Lloyd Howell to a job that had never existed before? Do you believe, in fact, that you did your job in representing the best interests of those players whose window to capitalize on that information came and went? Because guess what? You can't jump in the time machine and undo that stuff. And so their remedy, those players' remedy, which we have heard about now in the background for weeks, is litigation, should they choose to pursue it. And the case is for lawyers to assess, I suppose. But it's when I talk about the Craig Jones email, my other favorite artifact, Mike, which you reported, which you got, right? One of the great series of sentences that JC to Jonathan Jones on the CBS report dismisses as, I guess, I need a thesaurus. It's like, yeah, you should get one, because what he's saying is that you betrayed this once proud entity. And when Craig Jones, the head security officer, who's been there forever, who is like, I would say this in terms of my understanding of him, he is long tenured and long respected. One of these true believers who remembers the days of this being Gene Upshaw's union. And let's not joke about that. That's what it aspired to be, right? Respectable, a worthy counterbalance to the most important sport in American life. What that guy's saying is, we're not idiots. We see how you arrived here. We see how you engineered things. We see and have heard what it cost us. And that is both a question of reputation, certainly, which JC has had the most to say about his reputation in all of these now post-resignation sort of like exit interviews. But it's also in terms of actual money to players, his constituents. How do they feel? That's also to come.
That was one of the things he said with Dan Patrick today, that he was asked not to respond to the untruths that were being said about him. Well, why? Why? If you're being lied about, who's asking you to keep your mouth shut? And if you had been lied to about the hidden collusion ruling, wouldn't you at some point say, I'm not playing this game anymore? People are blaming me for something I didn't do. They're pointing at me for something that was taken from me. I'm the chief strategy officer who was excluded from the strategy of this thing, and I'm taking the heat for it. And you want me to keep my mouth shut about it? Are you kidding me? So, again, it feels like this is a reclamation project by JC Tretter. I don't know what his next job is. I don't know. Is he looking for something in media? Is he looking to go work for the league? I don't know. But it feels like, at a minimum, he's just trying to clean up whatever might be out there that for whatever reason he didn't try to clean up as it was happening.
Here's a question for JC Tretter along those lines. When did you finally realize that Lloyd Howell had to resign? I would say, Mike, in this 37 minutes almost, we've outlined a number of exit ramps that any reasonable person would take. Right? It could be the FBI investigation, but that's clearly the last consideration. It could be the strip clubs, the private equity stuff. It could be the collusion ruling. It could be, by the way, interestingly enough, the second parallel ruling that we unearthed exclusively, the two of us, in which it was clear that JC Tretter was also the protagonist in this other decision that was made to not talk about a case the NFLPA lost because of stuff JC Tretter said on a podcast to Ross Tucker about running backs faking injuries. The NFL never talked about it. The NFLPA never talked about it. Everybody on both sides, when we were reporting this, tried to make it seem like, in fact, of course, the NFL had nothing on the NFLPA. That was the NFLPA's actual statement.
Ridiculous. This has always been ridiculous, even though we lost.
Well, they didn't say even though we lost. We only knew that for sure because we got the document. Again, all things going back to the document. And so now they were revealed to not be telling the truth about what happened there. A case which, and again, why is this Veep? It's because JC Tretter was the protagonist. He was the actual defendant in that arbitration. And so at what point in all of this, and again, there's more, there is yet more that I don't even have time to mention right now that are in all of the reporting. Was it the fact that when you realized after electing JC Tretter that he was complicit as a CFO of Booz Allen Hamilton, a giant consulting firm, which was found to be, forced to pay the largest financial fraud settlement in known U.S. history, and you were the guy that the whistleblower came to, Lloyd Howell, and you said nothing? Was it that point that you realized, JC, that you made a bad choice? Because there were a series of exit ramps, and he took none of them. And so the whole idea of, you know what, I didn't want this guy, I didn't vote for him. Let's just grant the suspension of disbelief for that for a second here. I don't even care about that. Let's just leave that to the side, although I have many things to say about that. Spoiler alert to come. I merely want to know, when did you realize that Lloyd had to go, and why did you wait until he resigned to do anything resembling separating yourself from this guy? Feels like a reasonable question.
Reasonable question that he would never give a reasonable or plausible answer to. And I think as a practical matter, and I do want to give Don Van Natten and Kalen Kaler specific credit for this, because plenty of people think that my return to Pablo Torre finds out and the document we unearthed, the second hidden collusion grievance, that was not collusion, but this was the fake injury grievance, but the second hidden grievance ruling, that was the thing that caused Lloyd Howell to go. I think knowing that the strip club expense report was coming is the thing that caused him to walk before that dropped.
The dominoes, man. Again, you can only see it as that meme of like, you tipped over one thing. And again, the first thing is Jordon Hudson. But you count the steps, and you're right. Like I've used this metaphor in trying to wrap my head around this because I fully want to credit the strip club stuff as well as I did before. But again, here, you know that carnival game where there are like a bunch of coins that you drop in, and there's this platform that moves in and out, and you sort of hope for the coin to be the coin to tip over everything, right? It's the accumulation of coins
and all those coins are just kind of hanging on the edge and they won't fall.
And you're yelling at your friend on the phone. Why aren't the coins falling? Hypothetically, why are they still in power? And then it takes that last coin to get the attention of everybody. Like, oh, this seems bad. This seems unspinnable. This seems like a headline we can't suppress or hide in legalese. And so, yeah, that felt like the last straw. And is it on some level, again, depressing that the unearthing of a second ruling was not enough of a coin to hit the jackpot, so to speak? Of course, but I also understand why the strip club stuff was. And it was, again, man, it's the accumulation of everything. And that was, it's like, come on, what are we? It's a clown show, man. The whole thing of like, I am plausibly, speaking now as Lloyd or JC, I am plausibly someone who just wanted the best for this organization, but the power plant melted down. I'm like, you could say that if you haven't been paying attention, if your audience hasn't been paying attention, right? If Craig Jones has been paying attention, if the people who you represent, the players, by the way, the retired players, Sam Acho, former EC committee member who you wrote about, JJ Watt, Benjamin Watson, Chris Long, right? On and on and on. These guys started to realize, Booger McFarland, these guys who were actually media fluent enough to see what's happening here, they saw it before JC did. And JC was counting on nobody seeing it. Lloyd was counting on nobody seeing it. And Mike, I can't help but return to, and maybe now this is the through line truly, as I try to identify what's the common thread here. I return to Scooby-Doo. And they would have gotten away with it if not for those meddling kids. And thanks to artificial intelligence, I now know that, yes, we are both cartoon dogs after all.
Yes. I don't know who's Scooby and who's Scrappy, but you have the ears. My ears haven't grown in yet, so I guess I'm Scrappy.
Scrappy-Doo is an honored character that we also need to respect as an institution.
Yes.
Correct.
It's funny because usually the sitcom introduces the cute young kid as the kids who are the nucleus of the cast age beyond the point of cuteness. I'd love to have been privy to the internal conversations at the production company as to why they needed to introduce a younger, cuter version of a dog that never ages.
I think the real truth here is that we, the two of us, like those producers, like those animators, we're all probably actually just Shaggy. We're getting stoned in a van and making calls, and wherever this thing goes, it goes.
What if we take Scooby-Doo and shrink him?
What if I told you there could be another do? Like, well, now you have my attention.
There's so much more we could discuss, and there's so much more. Like, I had one piece of paper with just words on it. It doesn't matter. This is exactly what I thought it was going to be. 45-minute conversation, a couple of minutes over, enough for people to digest. You've got things to do. I've got things to do. Kristen, the producer, has things to do. So for now, let's just say not farewell, because this is just temporary. There will be more, whether it's on Pablo Torre Finds Out, whether it's here. I feel like, Pablo, we're still closer to the beginning of all of this than the end.
Oh, yeah, man. There's an interim, there's an election, there's a CBA negotiation. And as you alluded to, there's a paper by your side that obviously has the word confidential written on it. You got to get to that too eventually. So, yes, probably on my show sooner rather than later.
All right. Great stuff. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Check us out around the clock at profootballtalk.com. New episodes of Pablo Torre Find Out coming next week, right? Your crew's getting a much-deserved break. So next week for that.
Tired. Yes.
Next week for PFT Live. Check out his Substack. Give us the address again for your Substack.
www.pablo.show.
All right. And profootballtalk.com as well. Thanks again. We'll see you back here on Wednesday, everybody. Have a great day. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.